Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us is Chris Dearborn, Managing Director on Nasdaq's Market Intelligence Desk, for an update on technical levels to watch in the Nasdaq 100 as stocks trade lower following China COVID lockdown protests. Chris, it's interesting to see how the market is reacting around the world in response to these protests. I would be curious to see, if they didn't happen in earnest over the weekend, just how the market would have opened, because it felt as if you were starting to get some positivity back in the marketplace there.
As a whole, when you look at this time of year, the Thanksgiving holiday, the shortened Friday trading, and then coming out of the Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend, that there's usually a little bit of a boost, right? You talk about consumer spend. The NRF is out there saying that we're looking at 6 to 8% growth over last year, which is fantastic. And you're seeing good numbers come out from a number of the early companies that are reporting sales numbers, and they're strong. So that should have given the consumer edge there a little bit of spend on the plus side, which would have been good for an initial bump on the markets. But then on the flip side of it, you're looking at the Fed speak, which also kind of put a negative tone on the market today. And with that, if the consumer is robust in their spend, and if the discounts aren't as bad or as much as people think, then that excess capital is going to flow into the market, and that's exactly kind of what the Fed's looking to do on the inflation side. You had comments out from Buller today saying, they're looking to be stronger for longer here in the job market, and that's going to give the policymakers more work to do to kind of tame this inflation point. We got, the Fed chair speaking on Wednesday. That could put, some water on this market rally. But at the end of the day, down 1.5% where we are right now is not the worst thing. Again, that gives growth a little bit of a problem. It's been a growth for value story for the last couple of months, and that's kind of where we are. Any headline that is going to sap growth, whether it's domestic or international, is going to be a problem. And that's going to give investors pause, and that's what we're looking at today. That pause because of uncertainty, and uncertainty is always kind of bearish for the market.
Yeah, it really was quite remarkable, anecdotally speaking, not just this weekend, but the weekend before. Even prior to COVID-19, I do not remember the stores or restaurants being as busy as they were this past Black Friday weekend, which, to your point, Chris, I think lends to the positivity that we see around this time of year. But it feels that all the lockdowns are over. Family's been back together. I mean, we were out every night this weekend at different parties and seeing friends. I'm not sure that was the smartest choice, but it just feels as if that demand is really on display this holiday season. But let's take a look at the numbers, right? Because that's really what drives the story here. What are the technical levels that you're watching in the Nasdaq 100 now?
Right, so the index really sold off this afternoon. We opened at 11,684. We're trading just below that right now at about 11,600. The index did make a low, intraday low, about 35, 40 minutes ago. We really needed to recapture that opening here to kind of put this day into perspective. So remember, the index has been range bound between the 50-day moving average, which is 11,340, and the 23.6 Fibonacci retracement level from the October lows, and that stands at about 11,895. As long as the index continues to trade within this range bound item, a move up or down 1 to 1.5% is really not going to make much of a difference for the longer term. You're looking at a breakout one way or a breakdown the other. And until it moves out of one of those two areas on a closing basis, on a higher volume for a minimum of 3 days is what we're looking for, I'm still range bound. Support right now is 11,550, then 11,490. Resistance is kind of tight in the near term at 11,675 and 11,730.
And finally, Chris, your last chart here, if we could take a look at the constituents adding or detracting from performance this afternoon.
Yeah, breadth is really negative today as expected on that value versus growth story, 20 winners to 80 losers. You've got PDDs up over 13%. They made a new 52-week high in the back of earnings. Very strong, robust company out of China doing well on the e-commerce front. Amazon's also up this afternoon, but only adding about 5 points or so. And Tesla's having a stronger day on some cost cutting on the redesign of the Model 3. And then on the flip side, you've got Apple down on fear of a shortage for iPhones, about 6 million out of China due to the COVID lockdowns. Microsoft's down, tracking about 30 points. And Alphabet, with the two classes of stock, is negative about 12 points between the two of them.
All right, Chris, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.